Okay, without an easy way to get back to Vicksburg, and obviously that didn't work terribly well for the Union. I don't think they caused a single casualty to the Confederate artillery. Doesn't look like it. Which is odd. Like a full-on assault they might have been able to. But there were too many artillery there for them to really be able to bust their way through. We could try to set up a siege. Our alternative is maybe to go interfere with Johnston. What I'm looking at here is something of the... and to get a siege, I just have to occupy these three areas. And then we start a siege, and we start to wear it down. And the only way the Confederates can break that up is to completely knock the Union out of those areas, out of one of those areas. And then supplies will start flowing again. What I'm seeing here, and I kind of like this, is something like a 17th century siege, early 18th century as well, where because there's a relieving force out there, I want the majority of my force to be in a screening force, something that can prevent the relievers from being able to relieve the siege in a field combat. Now, I've got to be careful because these guys are a danger. These guys, as long as they're stuck here, that's fine, because I've got a pile of units that are stuck there too. But if those guys become free, then they can, try to bust out. But right now they're pinning down one of my commands, basically. I've got one other big command. I probably want to commit some of that command to actually holding the siege areas, in particular this one, and maybe in obtaining this one because there's Confederates there. And I think the larger portion of my force to take on Joe Johnston. The problem with all of that, and at least prevent him from being able to intervene effectively. Now, there's no interception or anything there's no reaction movement at the area level. So if Johnston moves into, say, Mount Alban, and I don't have that adequately defended, well, he can just overrun it and clear the siege, and he doesn't have any movement problems. So I've got to have enough to handle him right now and later eventually, and also some amount to prevent these artillery, for example, from just being able to roll into an area and take it on. So we've got some additional units of 16th Corps. I don't know who the hell that is. Is that part of Sherman? Yeah, that's part of Sherman's command as well. Wisconsin Cav, and I'm going to take Grant with me because he'll be more useful somewhere else, are going, although there is a problem with leaving just McLaren back here. He does really suck. Pemberton may be better. I don't think so. I think Pemberton's attack. I think McLaren's defense is enough to hold Pemberton in place to some extent. But I'm going to want Grant to command my main force. And the Cav, I'm going to want the Cav for screening opportunities. Now, the Confederates, if they had any Cav, they could declare an interception of that Cav. But they do not, so I can get out of there freely. A successful cavalry probe going up here reveals a dummy. This is important because now I have a siege. Yeah, some of it's being held by Cav, but otherwise we've established a siege and we put the Vicksburg supply markers on the board. Now the Confederates are still holding this, so they get another victory point. And it honestly doesn't take a lot here. Now I stripped some of the dummies from here so that I would have more to put here. Again, not allowable, not specifically allowable by the rules, but on the other hand, I feel like the rules are written in such a manner that you can't really take dictums like, if it's not specifically allowed by the rules, it's disallowed type of thing to have any application in this game. I think you have to use a certain amount of common sense and make your own decisions there. We're not going to see any battles here. And yeah, this threat is essentially unimportant. It's like these forces down here. It's basically known that that's not the case. But the only reason for it is to provide some level of discomfort to the Confederates here. But we're pretty sure we know these are dummies too. So there's not much value to that. It actually, what is present is pretty damn well known at this time. I already moved Pemberton out, but the big call at this point, actually this doesn't get placed until the end of the Confederate turn, just a little bit of bookkeeping there. A little bit of consternation here. I'm not sure I should launch an attack with Pemberton to be able to get my force back to Vicksburg so that this big force doesn't have another crack at just those cannons. I think putting Pemberton back there alone is sufficient, and I'm trying to rush Johnston to at least look like he's presenting some sort of a threat, although I don't think I want to get too close. On the Union side of the turn, we see a large formation moving up here. Actually, let me steal some of these. See, I'm out of dummies, that's the problem. Let me steal a couple of these dummies here. Steal a couple of them here. Dummies prevent dummies from moving, so they're kind of useful to have spread out. I'll leave 2 of them down here for that particular facet. And then these guys, guess I'll move in. Okay. So we've got a lot going on right now in terms of the Union kind of trying to put a push here that may make the Confederate position forward to be too dangerous. It is kind of dangerous anyway, because if this is real, which I think it is, I know it is actually, but the Confederates think it is, might be attacked across here. It might also be outflanked up there, although that would potentially break up the siege. I'm not going to be able to bust the siege up with everything that's going on. So I think the Rebs are going to fall back a little bit. Oh, I got to look at the straggler recovery rules. See, I thought they have to be alone to do it. Yeah, it's unoccupied by real enemy infantry. So I've got some stragglers here that I can't get back, even though generally in areas this large, if units are not in direct combat, they would recover their stragglers. This game doesn't allow for that. And it's okay. It's a good mechanism, even if it doesn't fit well with, what you see in, say, a CWB game. Or in actual battlefield situations where troops would recover stuff. It may represent a larger straggler problem in nature than what you see on the battlefield itself. All right. More reinforcements coming in for Johnston. And the Vicksburg supply track goes down. Well, we've got a problem. Once I gather the Confederate forces under Johnston, I think I got to do something to try to break the siege. And the Union position is just looking fairly impenetrable right now, to tell you the truth. And how I'm going to do that is going to be kind of tricky. I may aim to go up along the north there. This is the little Champion Hill scenario, and you can see, hey, Johnston's on the board. That's when Champion Hill is going to happen. And it really becomes sort of the determining factor in the operation, because if you can prevent Johnston and Pemberton from the Battle of Jackson happens in there too, I think. If you can prevent, I don't remember. I'm so bad at this level of thinking in terms of my history. I know a lot of wargamers are really into this kind of map, and obviously better presented than just huge black magic markers on the board. But really following along, say, the World War II or American Civil War battle or Napoleonic battle plans for the whole operational level, or even Grand Tactical, I find those really hard to follow for some reason, which is weird because I really like maps and stuff. I never have found the military maps to be terribly informational to me. So the Battle of Jackson is May 14th. That would be back here. It would have been the first turn of that scenario. The Union in the historical went up this way. By the way, someone mentioned that there was an attempt to cross the Yazoo, but here's the thing. The way it was stopped, it was done previously to the events in the game back in February. And I was aware that there were these weird attempts, to get around the fortress. Grant was very innovative in terms of how he wanted to deal with things, which is part of what he was so great about. Was not only was he innovative, Burnside was innovative, he was also somewhat effective in terms of when his one idea that he thought was cool didn't work, he'd go on and figure something else out. With Burnside, he was like, well, that didn't work. Well, I'll think some more, which is a lot like me, rather than, well, we got to do this no matter what. My clever idea didn't work. All right, I'll patch together something, without being too clever. Anyway, let's see what happens here, because we're getting, this is really the key and instrumental point in the campaign historically, and it looks like it's developing in just such a way. Instead of going this way, yeah, we've established the siege earlier. I don't feel like we have I have the roaming force that I would like available to me, though. By roaming force, I mean that screening force for the siege. And then also, the Confederates are sitting behind a river here in good terrain. I don't know if I really want to go there. Now, the question is, did they move their real forces back here to gather up with these, or are they still far forward? And as the Union, I don't know. I have to assume the worst case, and am I willing to accept that? There's another possibility that I'm thinking of, which is Pemberton could, if need be, try to break out somewhere like here. There is not a lot of force there. I might be able to beat up a cav, or maybe there is nothing there, The danger to that is if I end up emptying Vicksburg, and that's scary. I'm left with kind of a lot of hard choices on the siege that I do not like the sound of. And yeah, I actually am kind of beginning to like how this is playing out. I don't feel like, the special Grant role, that his army doesn't have to trace back to anywhere, means that I was able to push through those rivers a little more easily than you would normally see in these campaigns. The fact of the matter, though, that this is a point siege, that I have to surround, and unless the Confederates do something absolutely idiotic, and I thought they had, it apparently isn't going to fall very easily. So my idiocy has been, protected by. It didn't turn out as bad as I thought, but that's one of the problems with facing a game like this, is you're just kind of like that, sitting there saying, yeah, I don't know if I can survive this, and it turned out I survived quite well. However, the situation still looks rather bleak for the Confederates, as it should, unless Pemberton and Johnston could somehow get together. It's going to be really, really tough. And even if they can, they can't stand up and trade blows with the Union Army. But what they could do is pin much of the Union Army in place so that Vicksburg won't fall. But You want to do that further away from Vicksburg than we are, hence defending on the big black or whatever. Impossible to do. Grant's just too good. He's too clever. He'll push his way through somehow. The way the rules work, he's going to make it through. You're not going to be able to cordon the river completely. It's rain now on this turn, and that's actually kind of going to just put a slowdown on everything, which is great for the siege, you know. But yeah, I can't see trying to launch an attack across the river or whatever. And it opens up a little bit of opportunity to slip away in the bad weather. They're going to take this chance of the rain as an opportunity to try to get away. The combat intensity levels are lower. I can put it in maybe a one-wing command under Bowen, because I slipped Pemberton out, and which is better, and then give myself an opportunity to get out of there next turn. And we have a stand versus a diversionary attack here. A lot of Confederate forces, but I didn't split into two columns. Why? You know, it's kind of an iffy thing. I would have an uncommanded force, which would be potentially vulnerable against the commander. Now, seeing that it's McClellan here, I probably screwed up. I probably should have split that. Because the point is, this 40 is not going to get a good fire combat rate, but it gets a better odds over on the combat intensity chart. So let's see what we got. Stand versus diversion is a 1. That goes down to a 0 because of the rain. We got the artillery figured in here. So we've got 40 versus 28. It's 1-to-1. I don't see any modifiers there, except the defender is in defensible terrain. So it goes down to 1-to-2. And we're at a 0. So there's no losses. Okay. And now we handle the fire combat. And that 40, I have a better leader in Bowen because there's nobody else present. So I get a shift to the right. And we're doing diversionary, so we're way over. And I think that's all we get. And we're going to be doing 2 hits to the Union. That'll be 6 victory points. Yeah, we're doing pretty good. Let me mark those there. And then on the Union side, they have 38. I may attack again. 38, 28, which also puts them on the top of the list. Now they're doing a stand, so they're further over. They get no modifiers in their favor. Let me make sure the attacker doesn't get something for terrain. Yeah, no terrain in the fire combat. And we get a 5 over here. We're causing a hit, so we'll be getting a couple of victory points. I'll mark those losses. The Confederates did pretty well here. Not enough to cause a casualty check. They may want to stick around and fight another round. They outnumber the Union. It may be time to batter up that Union force. Another round of combat. We're doing diversionary again because we don't want that combat intensity to go up. We drop down to what the terrain gives us a shift. So we'd be dropping down to 1-to-2. We don't want to increase that. The Union obviously doesn't want to counterattack. That'll screw up whatever advantage they have. They're outnumbered. And so we get to fire again. Now, the Confederates basically got a good die roll. That's what won them the battle so far. But, you know, that seems reasonable because we get more victory points for each. And if we're getting better losses, but that's an if. So diversion or withdraw, we have a shift in our favor. We're basically both on the same table. Here we get 1, and that'll be 3 more. And I'll mark that this way. And then the Union they're down to 26, still on the top of the chart. But what did we get a penalty for? Oh, we're on the same chart, yeah. Okay, we get 2, so maybe it wasn't such a a great thing to stick around. That's the end of the combat round, but it gives the Confederates the capability to leave next turn. Did a little Cav probe there. They didn't find anything. I'm going to stay there. Cav has a tendency to be able to run away from combat, etc. I kind of want to stick in the general area. Actually, I could withdraw. Yeah, I'll withdraw up to here. That gets me a little defensive bonus. And now I've kind of, covered the entire north of the map. It's all garbage, probably, but you don't know. There is one more Union Cav unit that is out there somewhere, so it could be kicking around somewhere. I can't help myself, launching an attack on Vicksburg. At this point, knowing that he's getting out, that he's going to be able to bring the whole force in, this is my last chance to take it. So Grant and Sherman are going in, and I got a little bit more troops this time, I think. I'm not sure. Yeah, I think I got a little bit more. And certainly 13th Corps has been kind of beaten up in the game so far. So I feel like rather than go for that long siege, and risk the chance that Johnson can maybe penetrate or something, let's just take Vicksburg now. Let's go with the coup de main. Makes sense to do things by half measure, so we're assaulting with both wings. And let's see if we can get Grant killed. Yeah. I'll be back in a moment after I do some of the mechanical calculations. But the Union is going to start with this wing. And the Confederates have to decide if they want to fire on the first wing, which the Union gets to pick, or on the second wing, which has, is probably the less, I don't know, we'll see. Right, so we're looking at stand versus assault. That's going to give us a 3 combat intensity. Strengths, they're just artillery, which is unfortunate because infantry defending Vicksburg is really, really powerful. But I don't have my infantry there. And that's why it's vital to make the attack now before the infantry gets there, because I will not be able to attack it if he gets there with the main force. So we're looking at 24 to 15. That's 1-to-1. We did not cross a river. However, we're in defensible terrain. So we go down to the 1-to-2. For whatever reason, we shot it way up to the 3 level. That means the Union takes 2, the Confederates take 1. Mark that like this. That's 1, 2 Union. I wonder if I'm 10 behind. And 6 Rebel. All right. That's beginning to look ugly. Now we go to the fire results. And remember, this is only one of 2 of the fights, but this is maybe the end of the game here, basically. So for the Union, we have an assault at what modifiers? 2 columns to the left. Okay, for the attacker, 2 columns if you do not want multiple formations in play. 1 column for each defender line adjacent to the one that's not, so we don't lose anything for flanking. Maybe I have the flanking opposite. No, it's bad for the attacker to be flanked. Okay. Shift 1 column to the right if there's, okay, I have a better officer. And I did not hit a withdrawing force. So I've got 1 shift in my favor with 22 strength points on an assault that I was at the end of the table anyway. And we will get 1 more casualty on the Confederates. And that'll be 2 more victory points for the Union. For the Confederates, they're going to shoot back here because otherwise we take these casualties. And we don't have a lot of hits on this artillery. We got 4 hits total. We've taken 2 of them already. So we have our 15 strength, which is modified by nothing. So we're 15 on a stand, which puts us 1 through 4. We succeed, we kill a Union unit, And that's 3 Confederate victory points. Okay. Now I got to resolve the damage here, and we may have casualties. Officer casualty. Combat intensity 3 or 4. An officer, if the line tape loses 3 or more strength points during the round. So I could lose Grant on 1 or 2, and that would be pretty significant. Does not happen. A little bit different because we knocked out some of that artillery. So we're looking at 22-9, which puts us at 2-1. Same combat intensity rating. Shift in Confederates' favor. It's going to be 1 hit on each. I've recorded these on the sheets. So that's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, and all right. And I'm finding this is the way to handle things. You know, I wouldn't have to use dice. I could do it all on paper, but it's easy with the camera to use dice. So now we look at what's going on here, which is only the Union gets to fire, which is key. So because the Confederates have already fired. So I've got a 22 shot. I'm the attacker. I do not have a better commander this time. McPherson is equal to Pemberton. And I did not force a withdrawal. So we're at 22 on the assault, which is top of the line. And we cause 1 more Confederate hit. That means the Confederates are almost wiped out in 1 round of combat. That's 2 more Union victory points for that. Not enough hits to cause a leader loss check, but the Confederates are pretty much doomed. I think Vicksburg is going to fall to this attack because we're going to go another round. That's us to 21 to 3, which is 7-1 out here. Now you can't go above the 5-1 column. The mountainous terrain drops us down to the 1-2, but we're at the 3. Each side takes 1 hit. Now you could try to guess and calculate. It's kind of like Warp War in this sense, where you can kind of try to outguess what your opponent's ship pick is going to be. I don't think there's much choice here. I think both people knew what was going to happen completely. So we each take 1. Well, each taking 1, and I probably should not have done an assault because of this, means that it's over. Because the Confederate forces have been defeated. Pemberton is fine. He escapes, but the Confederate artillery is destroyed. I have to record the losses. I had kind of fallen behind on the 15th Corps losses. I don't know if I had marked them somewhere else. I don't think so. I think McPherson had taken losses previously, so that's that. But I might have put them under McPherson accidentally, in which case the Union took like 3 more losses than they should have or something. And we have captured Vicksburg, which I'm going to mark by putting the Vicksburg supply marker here. If the Confederates manage to get it back, it's very rare. I see that as almost impossible because I've got infantry sitting here. That triple defense is pretty much that. So I think it's game over here. At this point, it's how many victory points can the Confederates get in the 3 turns they have to get Vicksburg back. Each turn that Vicksburg is besieged, I should have gotten a victory point. So that was, I think, 2 or 3 victory points. All right, and let's say Vicksburg does fall. This is it fell before the 17th or 18th, or on the 17th or 18th, which is worth another reason to do it this turn, which is worth 50 victory points. That would put the Union up to 80 versus the 69 for the Confederates. So how much, I could have certainly done it by the June 16th or 17th and still probably eked out a marginal win. And I think that would have been if I just sieged. But I think it was definitely the right thing to do to go charging in. Now we see what the rebels want to do. Reasonably, they probably don't want to attack. They probably want to try to disengage their army and get it the hell out of there, whatever that means. But, see, if this fell to siege, this force would surrender. That hasn't happened. It's loose now. And that's kind of important. By taking Vicksburg by an assault, you make it so that the army doesn't surrender, and it is still available. And the question is, what do I want to do with the army? In game terms, hey, what do you view victory, what do you view not, you know? If you view victory as, I did not get the most victory points, yeah, and that is the only determination. It's a binary. I'm either willing to destroy the Confederate army trying to take Vicksburg, or, I shouldn't be playing. Well, to me, that's kind of ridiculous. Basically, I don't think that there's a viable route for the Confederates to take Vicksburg at this point. We've got McClellan back here, and Grant's whole other forces here. I don't think trying to launch, what was this 36 plus 3 up against an approximately equal force that'll be tripled is at all viable. I don't think that Johnston being back here makes it viable. And then when you throw in the reinforcements, to me, I want to fall back. We'll keep playing, I guess, to no real end, but just to see how that disengagement by the Confederates works. Confederates declare combat, and this is one of the dangers of leaving dummies lying around. They get we can move out of here next turn, which might have been prevented otherwise. I'm not sure quite what that represents. It may represent the sort of, wow, we're worried here, so we're going to press to get control of the river, or whatever, to get control of the exit routes that we might possibly want, and surround all possible Union forces who are there and who might ever be there, or something like that. I really don't know what it is meant to represent. But as we can see, other Confederate forces trying to consolidate Johnston here. I can't get any more victory points with Pemberton. I can from combat, I think, but I can't get them from occupying locations, which is fine. He doesn't. In this particular game, because you're trying to defend this location, that's the only thing he's generating points from. This location does generate points for Pemberton. Now, the Union's no longer gaining points for sieging Vicksburg, but the Confederates are still gaining their points for Jackson, so that's kind of a problem. We'll keep pushing on. The decision not to make some kind of vainglorious all-or-nothing attempt to relieve Vicksburg, which would leave, the Confederates destroyed in the West entirely. It would be completely an unrealistic move. In fact, in a way, I'm getting out of this quite well by slipping Pemberton out of there. The situation is probably a far better one than the historical. I think this denouement to this game is going to be very uninteresting, but I'm going to play it out because of whatever. The Union moved 13th McClellan moved into here. Grant is up here with Sherman, and other forces are moving about to try to just cause some sort of interference. But one place I do want to, I think, launch an attack is up here. Now, am I allowed to? That's a good question. Yes, because I am not infantry, I think, but let me just make sure about the rules. But the idea is, I think I want to launch an attack there. The Confederates can pull out of here because I had a combat where I attacked the dummies. It's only regular infantry that have to maintain any kind of command line. So what we have is a couple of cav versus a bigger cav. Didn't realize, what the Confederates have. So what we're looking at is, I'm trying to remember, we're going to get a shift against us for that. Okay, so we've got an advance versus a stand, which is a regular 2 rating, and we've got 4 to 3, which puts us at 1 to 1. That puts us at 1 to 2. The Union's going to take a hit there. It gives the Confederates some more victory points. Being silly, I should just put a die down for that. And now we're looking, and because these are all cav, they all count as regular strength. Now we're looking at a firepower of 4 versus a firepower of 3, and the Union actually has a slight advantage there. I don't believe there's any column shifts in play. So the Union fails to get a hit. The Confederates fail to get a hit. So I've got just 1 Union hit. Does the Union want to keep fighting here? I mean, we're trying to take a point away, but we're expending more points. I think I'll just hold there. Confederate forces, dummy cav, the dummy infantry here can't stop it. Actually, I don't think I can withdraw because I would have to reveal a cav to be able to prevent it. Okay, so the Confederates have gathered all their forces here, and this is problematic for the Union. I could cross the river and try to attack them, or force march and maybe attack them, neither of which looks particularly appealing. I think what's going to happen is pretty obvious. We got 2 more turns to play out of this withdrawal, but I don't see anything of interest happening at this point. I'm going to be able to get back into some rough terrain, possibly followed doggedly by the Union. The one problem I'm not going to have an easy chance of dealing with, perhaps, is being able to fix my couple of stragglers, which are going to count as a couple more victory points against me. So I think I'm just going to wrap this up. I don't see much point doing it any further, which means there's like 74 victory points here and 81 here. There might be a few victory points to play around with. So there's going to be 2 Confederate victory points here, but it's going to end up not that big a swing in victory points for whatever that matters. And it kind of makes sense to me. In fact, if the Confederates give up Vicksburg, if they can delay the Union a little bit and then give up Vicksburg and get Pemberton out, that's actually a pretty good result rather than like the historical result, which is that Pemberton surrenders up there. So there are some other routes and pathways that you could see in this game that maybe, I haven't had time to explore, obviously, in one playthrough where I'm kind of bumbling around learning the system. I got to say this much. I had some real misgivings about the system. Honestly, both times I've played. I played it opposed once, and at first I was kind of like, wow, this is pretty stupid. It doesn't seem like there's much fighting, and there's not much room for maneuver because it's so slow. You move 1 area at a time, maybe 2 if you force march. You got your cav, etc. But it actually does seem to play out in a very interesting sort of manner. You're not seeing lightning movements, etc. You're seeing slow attempts to try to get positional advantage, try to get around the enemy's positional advantage. It all flows very nicely. I find it a lot more pleasant than the one play that I had of great campaigns in the American Civil War. Maybe because this sort of this is more intuitive to me. And I've got to say, Lee versus Grant, which is supposedly some sort of predecessor to great campaigns in the American Civil War. And I got it kicking around. My games are such a mess right now because of a mold problem last year. Which I've cleaned up and everything. It's not the mold there that's any issue. If there's mold, that's somewhere hiding from me. So that game, I really kind of got some ideas about what was going on, and felt like it was a very, very tailored game to the situation that wasn't really nicely translatable to a system. It might have been, but I did like the fact that you had kind of pulsed movements and all kind of stuff like that, and I can see some of that in great campaigns in the American Civil War. But my feeling with GCACW is this kind of, oh gosh, can I do anything? Should I do anything? Or whatever. And in a game like Lee versus Grant, where you can, where you've got one game on the series, or, one game to look at, and to look at a couple of times maybe, you don't need that intuitive capability to understand what you're doing and what it kind of represents, and how it's happening. With this, without the pulse system, with the I go, you go, the area movement, the slow movement for the most part, it hits the wheels a little bit better, and I understand what to do. I don't feel like oops, somehow I just let the enemy behind my lines and now I'm fucked, which was something that I felt in Lee versus Grant, at the very least, a game I like. The graphics on the GCACW games, at least the old one that I played, may be part of the turnoff. The graphics to this work fine for this level of intuitive. I don't have to be pulled in further than the game itself. I feel like this game is appealing enough in terms of drawing what it is. This is not the review for the whole series. I am going to look at more of these. I was not certain about that. In particular, I thought that the hidden movement would be too problematic. I'm finding it very, very workable. For the most part, there might be big bluffs, but they're not, how do I put it? In general, they're going to be of a more strategic nature. Like, I'm sending a force in this direction and a force in this direction, and you don't know which one's the real one. What are you going to do to defend yourself? And as the defending player, you have a couple of choices. You could just guess, and sometimes that's going to happen, and then I'll roll a die for it. Or you can try to cover, the river line and say, well, this represents the fact that I don't know where the enemy really is, Anyway, what about the play of this one? Well, I followed a somewhat ahistorical route. It allowed me a quicker victory, but a less complete one, because that second Confederate army is able to escape. It was not surrendered. So, there's a lot to keep in mind on this, and to try to figure out, it might make more sense to go out, try to smash Joe Johnston, and then come back and deal with Pemberton all on his own, and where you're in the safety to follow the historical model, rather than Vicksburg is my goal, let me take it as quickly as possible, and then I'll respond with what I want. Anyway, there will not be a review for this. Again, I'll come back with the series for a review for the whole series and post that, because they all use pretty much the same rules. But this one in particular, well, I feel like Grant being kind of loosened from any command restrictions, able to wander around wherever he likes, makes him very, very powerful. But it may make sense given the fixed nature of the end result, possible supply from the river, although honestly, I really feel like, he should have to trace something back to the river or something, but that would not allow for the historical campaign where he's shooting up here. It would allow for far too much interference in the game. So, yeah, I think the system actually works pretty well with that little, with that one change. That's the big change in the game. Anyway, I had fun, and we'll go to something else, I think, before we go to the next one in the series. So I'm sending this up.